Pharma CX Tech Summit. This panel is a group of experts that we've gathered together. One you've just seen present on platforms, and the others that we're gathered here to talk about very similar content, get some extra opinions, get some extra perspectives on that as well. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Let's start with Jim, because everyone just got done watching your presentation. Fantastic, sir. Why don't you tell any newcomers who you are and what you do?
Great. Thanks, Seth. Jim Lefevere. I'm International Business Leader for Digital Partnering Solutions with Roche Diabetes Care. I've been with Roche for 20 years, which I always get a little shocked when I say that. It certainly hasn't felt like 20 years. But all my entire career has all been in the commercial side, marketing, digital strategy, and most recently, innovation and product development.
And Steve, say hello.
Hello, I'm Steve Peretz, and I'm with Appnovation. And overall, we focus on patient-centric solutions, so how to identify and validate the right types of ideas with our actual customers, and then how to bring them to life through the whole gamut and digital solutions of UX, design, tech.
And Mary?
And I'm Mary Lassiter. I work for Bayer on their digital platform team that's representing the US.
Excellent. So the title of this panel, or subtitle, if you will, most healthcare apps fail, but yours doesn't have to. And having been in the industry for the last 10, 12 years, I've seen a lot of healthcare apps come and go, healthcare technology ideas come and go, however you want to characterize those. So we'll be talking about that, some keys to success for launching an app or healthcare technology, but also a lot of the other ideas, do's and don'ts, and other aspects of that subject. So very, very easy question to start out with, because I don't think there's any right or wrong answer here. How do you serve your patients beyond the pill? So Steve, how do you serve your patients beyond the pill? What does that even mean?
Sure. Yeah, well, the pill plus movement, right? So it starts with patient support, and there's a couple key themes of what beyond the pill at least means to us. Patient support being the biggest theme across conditions. We look at focusing on how we can address that blind spot when the patient they're not always with their doctor. And there's a lot of moments where, we don't know what's going on. So digital can really come in and help there. And that really starts with health literacy. So if the patient can't even understand the condition, how likely are they to be motivated to actually actively manage it? And just to put that into perspective, according to United Health Group, there's about a $25 billion problem right now with health literacy, and that's in the US alone. So we support patients through those critical moments along their journey, not just while they're taking a pill or at the doctor's office. And the irony is that when we do that really well, we're actually able to demonstrate some business goals, how we've actually encouraged discussions between a patient and a doctor about treatment options and medication adherence, which has obviously been a big theme today as well. And then just a quick example of how we try to put this pill plus movement into practice. One of our clients had a challenge of getting patients to understand their risk of stroke once diagnosed with AFib. And when there was a lack of understanding of the risk, patients were unmotivated to seek, or consider any treatment options. So we built an app, in this case, an app. We'll talk about why not always do you have to think about an app, but in this case, it was an app. And it was a shared decision-making platform that empowered patients to be more involved in the conversation with their doctors. So the app facilitated the conversations through an algorithm, and it produced a risk score to help physicians and patients better understand their risk, but really what to do about it and understand what the treatment options can be. So rather than immediately just shoving a treatment option down a patient's throat, how do you involve the patient in the process? So that way you're actually going beyond the pill itself, right? And the beauty of that is that this app is now in some clinical trials to determine how effective digital solutions like this could be in those critical intervention points.
So you're talking about beyond the pill being once the medication is prescribed or given, looking at what happens afterwards. Mary, do you have a similar or different definition of beyond the pill?
Yes, so coming from more of a marketing side or adherence side, I look at great customer experience. So with personalized messages at the right time. And what this could be is I kind of think of when you go to the pharmacy, or now if you're going to CVS, Rite Aid, or one of those major pharma, a lot of times they have their apps that you can get on and they know what you're on. And when you think about that, basically when you're given that medication, they actually send you text messages now to remind the customer or the patient when you need to take the medication, how to take it. And they send it now through, multiple channels. So when you think of that app, you start there, but then it's also push notifications. It can be SMS, it can be email, and they actually see where, the patient is most likely, what channel. And so that it could be a simple message, for instance, a text message right before in the morning, the customer needs to take the pill, the patient needs to take the pill. They get a text message with a simple video, a 1-minute video. Hey, here's tips and tricks of how to help with the best absorption, or when do you need to take your multivitamin? These are just simple tricks that can be, put into, the app, but also integrated into your marketing as well and adherence plans.
So taking that a little bit of not necessarily a step further, but expanding it laterally with regards to the blind spots that occurs after the drug is prescribed, and the 362 days that you're not with your doctor or not going to see your doctor throughout the year. Jim, beyond the pill, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I love the support and I love the marketing. I'm going to actually maybe go a few steps back and suggest that the initial customer insight, really truly understanding the job to be done before you create anything, from an innovation perspective, is something that can help prevent building something that fails at launch. And so deeply understanding the customer, deeply understanding how to correct or fill a pain point that they might have. And then during the development innovation process, make sure that you have milestones and that you are running research, generating real world evidence that continually demonstrates and shows to you that what you have built and what you are building meets the needs of the customers. That goes a significant way in terms of handling or trying to not launch something that will fail at launch. But I love the idea of the support and the marketing, because I think in combination, if you are thinking about and doing all of those things, then you are significantly de-risking the odds of failure.
That sounds almost like before beyond the pill.
Right.
Trying
exactly.
to think about what's going on. So that's the next question that I was going to ask you guys, is that, what are some strategies that would give your app or technology platform or technology intervention a better chance for success? So Jim, you mentioned, the initial customer insight and putting the problem first and trying to figure that out. We had some folks earlier in the day talk about a lot of people going around with solutions looking for problems. And right, if you have a hammer, everything is a nail. But can you expand on that with regards to the initial customer insight, or what are some other strategies that would give your technology effort a greater chance to succeed?
Well, I think it starts with that deep understanding, and from a kind of a customer insights perspective, making sure that you have really rich, deep information.
How do you get that?
Whether you want to call it personas or archetypes, or whatever disease condition that you work in, truly understanding all aspects of that individual that may be taking that drug, how they live, And it could be, literally identifying somebody and following them around for 48 hours, but truly getting a deep appreciation for the issues that they may have hour to hour.
So looking at not only data, but also maybe some first-person research, some actual observation and boots on the ground type of insight that you can get back from that. Mary, how can my app be a success? What type of strategy or advice would you give to myself as a young aspiring app maker that wants to solve a problem in the healthcare space?
I'm going to look at an organization of how do you make it successful. And when you think about it, you got to have a great customer experience, both internally within the organization and externally. So it's got to be simple and easy to use. So you got to incorporate design thinking. So design thinking from who's going to be using it within the organization, those brand marketers, the IT, the data and analytics folks. Is it going to be easy enough for them to set up within? And then you got to be thinking externally, those that are going to be using it, the patients, the customers, the HCPs, whoever it is. And is it going to flow seamlessly and be easy and simple for them to use? And is it going to make sense within their day when they're going to use it? So you can think of that CVS with the follow-up reminder. Is it relevant? Okay, it was in the morning that the medication was supposed to be delivered. Is it relevant? Does it make sense? Is it a manual that they have to read, or is it a simple video? So thinking about those different logics along the way, how you're going to be delivering and allowing them to use that.
So when you talk about simplicity for both the organization as well as the patient, obviously, in this case, a patient-facing solution, do you think it's easier to sell the idea upwards if it's simpler to get
Definitely.
support from the folks that you need on Mount Olympus to make it happen?
Most definitely. The simpler it is, the easier you're going to get a buy-in from the organization. And how is it going to solve their problem? Where's the win-win? Obviously, the more entrenched it is, the harder it is to use, the harder it is to get everybody else along that food chain that needs to be deploying that app to use it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking that, the easier it is for them to understand, the easier it is you're going to get funding, you'll be able to get approvals, all that kind of stuff, get support within the organization, as well as the folks in the organization that are using it. Steve, 3 strategies to give your app a better chance for success.
Yeah.
Or 1 or 7,
I do
depending.
like this theme that we're gravitating towards on simplicity, and just want to share a quick case study of how to put that into practice. So, to Jim's point, sometimes people might rush into, oh, this needs to be an app, or here's the technology, here's the solution, but really first looking at the patient problems, right? So how do you actually go about doing that? We take a lot of pride in what we call lean research. We call it lean because the term research can often be very scary, especially in pharma. It can sound like 6-month process, 6 figures to get off the ground. So, we're able to call it that because if you look at Nielsen, they said that the point of diminishing returns on getting user feedback is 5 people. So if you do get the right 5 patients in the right audience and stuff, the demographics and everything, then you actually would have something substantial. So in practice, we had a pharma client, and they wanted to create an app in the oncology space. And the biggest thing is they really wanted more confidence to know that what they were doing, was worth the financial investment. So they looked to a lot of market research, but the biggest gap that we saw, and we always use this buzz term, patient centricity, is if you want to know if a patient will use your app, ask the patients, ask your sample patients. So what that ends up turning into is what we call desirability testing. So the possibility of testing the app in its concept stage to understand what the patient would actually use, what they're currently using, maybe where there are some gaps. Learn that early on rather than doing some usability testing late stages. You can always win on usability testing. To Mary's point too, like, will someone click the button? That makes it easy enough to use, but will they actually download your app or whatever type of solution it is? You need to make sure that there's that desirability. So really, other than that, I think one of the most interesting strategies that we found, be curious too, from Mary and Jim is, to really give yourself a good chance of success, start small. Small where it's significant enough to be differentiated in the market. Will this be needed in the market, or is this already in existence? And is it something that your patient might use either daily or definitely? But then we found that if the idea is overly complex, it becomes a little too overwhelming for the organization. Either it doesn't get off the ground or it just never makes it to launch.
Gotcha. Going back to what you said about testing the usability with patients or actual users whoever that would happen to be, is that something that your organization would do? Does the brand or the parent company do that, or do you outsource it to a market research, or you just kind of just wing it? Like, how does that work? Where do you find the patients to? I'm just curious how that works. Like, where do you find the patients to do the testing?
Yes, yeah, very fair. So I think Jim might have touched on it in his last presentation about platforms and having that mindset. We often will, and part of that mindset, he talked about advocacy and partnerships. So sometimes we're fortunate where our clients or we have certain relationships with advocacy organizations that can provide the exact patient type. If not, there's some great groups out there like Schlesinger that will rely on, it's a third party. They'll not only find the patients, but go to that due diligence. The reason 5 works is you really make sure it's someone that has the condition actively managing or not, like exactly what you're looking for to find them. But what we really specialize in outside of that recruiting is running the research, right? So what stimuli are you using? And this whole adoption of lean research will design in Figma, meaning that we can actually in real time make updates based on what our patients are telling us.
And if you're not making updates, then you're not evolving because people aren't using it.
So, right.
Good stuff there. If we were live, I would just ask the studio audience to raise their hands if everyone had been in a situation where somebody said, make an app. We need an app. Usually, nowadays you would say, for why? Why do we need an app? Right. Back in the day, you would just whip up an app and get it out there because you were told to do it. And that's why a lot of these things fail. But if apps aren't the answer for you, then what other type of digital products, solutions, platforms are available? So, again, piggybacking off Jim's prior presentation, why don't you tell us a little bit about what other options are out there, and then also tell us a little bit about exactly the technology, the diabetes technology with which you work.
So kind of playing off, the platform idea, for me, I think innovation can come from really anywhere. And so certainly internally to the organization, but then also externally to the organization. And that's where I think the partnering and really understanding deeply kind of how startups, in regardless of the disease condition that you work in, how are startups trying to tackle different problems, I think is very important, and deeply understanding that. And by doing so, I think you can understand how that, in combination with perhaps assets that you have in your organization or combination of products bundled together, can create something net new. And so I often talk about either 1 + 1 = 3 or 2 + 2 = 5, is that when you bring together a combination of solutions, you are not only is that innovation, but it is also creating new value. And if you are doing so in a way that you're bringing things together that solves a customer problem in a new and unique way, then you have a new product, you have a new innovation, and you are able to bring something new to the market. I just think about the payers and the IDNs and how they literally have hundreds, if not thousands, of people calling on them trying to bring their solution to that hospital network, to that system, and how difficult that must be to manage. And if there is a way to be able to be a intermediary for that, and to bring solutions, and the key is to bring solutions with evidence forward, I think then, that is really how you can win. The evidence, though, is the key, and making sure that you are able, through that combination of products, making sure that you are able to improve outcomes. I think that's the secret sauce.
Do you have an example of that bundling, or the 1 + 1 = 3 kind of situation that you described?
For
one that you
my
could share.
business, it would be a hardware device plus an app plus something, and that could be anything. But bringing these things together in a combination that helps the patient either monitor, in my case, BG value, be able to store and track that BG value, and then be able to share that with their physician, and then over time build a data profile where they could understand highs and lows better, that gets shared with their physician, and they could proactively perhaps intercede on a potential low or a situation. I mean, that would be a really high level example.
So you also mentioned payers and IDNs, and I'm going to throw this question out to everybody in concurrently with, what are the options for apps? But when you think about it, if the drug that you're on has an app, and your hospital system has an app, and your doctor wants you to use an app, but your insurance company also wants you to use an app, which one is correct? Which one is one you should use? Are they, obviously they're not interoperable. Trying to be able to streamline that process and be able to have, one type of technology that would be appropriate, rather than having 5 stinking diabetes apps that you're given for, just one drug, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So when we think about that, Mary, what other types of options are out there, if not apps? And, how could you solve for this app mania problem that you have with different sources of your healthcare responsibility?
Definitely. So I think that this comes into when you think about how you bundle your app with other technology, that probably comes more into like that campaign space, where how can we help progress or move that journey along of that patient? And one area that I looked at is both offline and online, what products work well with this is, in a past case study, we actually saw a cookbook for a diabetes franchise was actually something that patients called the support hotline asking for more cookbooks for their friends and family to support them in that journey. So looking at these little touch points along the way, so whether it's on the app or whether it's off the app, looking at that data and saying, hey, how can I best interact? Whether it's through that campaign or through the call center, how can we get all this data together? And how can we start to bundle all that information and start to roll it into an app, or start to put it into that front-facing vehicle that the patient may be using?
So did you digitize the cookbook and make a diabetes cookbook app that they can download?
So eventually, yes, that'd probably be a good idea. But a lot of times folks like the actual paper copy for that cookbook, because when you're having to cook, if you think about what the patient's having to do, they probably have 100 things going on. Having that paper on the table and just being able to read was what they wanted for that particular age group and that demographic.
Now, I watch television. Everyone has a 13-inch iPad in their kitchen with an Alexa, so they can just shout out commands to it, right? So the digital cookbook would be perfect for that.
Absolutely. That's the next generation.
But that's another example of personalization, and just listening to the data coming back to you saying, like, no, they didn't want, they wanted a hard copy cookbook. So Steve from Appnovation, I guess if apps aren't the answer for you, you would just be Novation then.
Right.
What other types
No,
of
very
products
fair.
or platforms can you?
Yes, a quick clarification. So Appnovation stands for Applied Innovation, which we're quite proud of because it's the ability to apply the innovation of an idea. But
well,
always
sounds a lot like
app.
Appnovation. So I was just
Yes, understood. Not the end of the world. We are very proud of our ability to create apps as well. Really wild, Mary, have the exact same experience for congestive heart failure, where the cookbooks were the hottest item, and it's a printout, right? What we did do is we digitized it where it was snackable content. So rather than necessarily a full PDF of the entire cookbook, sometimes it came out in stages. Here's the great, heart healthy blueberry oatmeal recipe. And there's a beautiful visual, sometimes a video like you talked about earlier, because very visual audience. But a lot of chronic conditions, 55 plus, is it so surprising that sometimes they want to be complemented with printed materials? It's okay. I don't know that I have anything else to add really on the point of apps. I think the one thing is if you have a good enough idea, ideally if it can be like what Jim said of a platform where you are tapping into other things and it's not just one pharma company or brand talking at a patient, then it absolutely is worth the download. It's about the simple experience that Mary was suggesting. But lastly, the first step is we try our best to actually convince ourselves and our clients of why not to do an app, because sometimes it means it's cheaper, it's faster, it's more efficient. But there's often real legitimate reasons why you do need one, if you need offline capabilities or native technologies that integrate with wearables and so on. But we actually try to convince ourselves and our clients first, does it need to be an app? If not, is there a website or another form of a digital program?
And back in 2011, I said to a colleague of mine who worked for an app maker, I said, apps are dead because we have microsites. They can do everything that apps can do. I was wrong. So when looking at bringing this into your organization, we only have about 2 minutes left. So a quick snippet about change management in an effort to grow that type of mindset within the organization, or any thoughts about positioning a digital product or solution internally to get buy-in and funding. We talked a little bit about that with Mary and Simplicity. So Jim, change management, buy-in, funding. You mentioned a lot of things about, doing all the homework up front and making sure that you have a good foundation, but what parting words or phrases could you offer here?
Yeah, I would just say, start with the insight, the problem that you're trying to solve for that patient, and then from a change management perspective, I mean, if you follow that insight, I think it makes getting funding easier. If you're trying to move to agile, I just always recommend you got to dive in feet first and get into it and kind of learn the hard way. It's not really something that you can do, academically by reading a book. You have to get in and start doing it in order for it to take shape.
Steve, change management, internal buy-in, funding, championing.
Yes, just real quick, the problem with change management is that, and Harvard Business Review would back this up, is that often it's 70% chance of failing. And the reason is it's often too big. We talk about transformation, so often overwhelming. But some quick strategies to succeed, echoing Mary's point earlier about the simplicity. If you think about the 100-page decks that probably hit your inbox every day, that's not really a recipe for success. How can you make it really simple in the message, elevator pitch, memorable, and then establishing a WIFM? So what's in it for me? If you're trying to get a whole organization to adapt or just a department, how can you convince them that there's something that's in it for them aside from just a brilliant idea that you want to achieve? What's in it for the rest of the organization?
And Mary.
I'm going to make this simple for you. Fail fast, learn quickly.
Fail fast, learn quickly. These are all great nuggets of advice that we can take back and use tomorrow in our everyday purviews. So great stuff coming out of this, thinking about where, when, how, why. to not only design, build, affect the change for a technology solution, but it could be an app, could be a platform, could be something else. I thank you, our panelists, Mary, Jim, and Steve. Fantastic job. Great discussion.